The two most anticipated books right now are Doors of Stone and Winds of Winter. And this is really interesting because the two authors that are writing these two books, Patrick Rothfuss and George R. R. Martin, have literally been reduced to dogs in the eyes of the fandom. Screaming pack of hyenas are literally frothing at the mouth by the concept that George R. R. Martin seems to be taking his time with his writing. And the same goes for Patrick Rothfuss with Doors of Stone. People have literally reduced these two authors, Patrick Rothfuss and George R. R. Martin, to dogs. They have lost empathy for these two authors, and every now and then you will see a major scandal break about these two authors being lazy and everyone just piling on them. Last September 2020, this actually happened with Patrick Rothfuss and Brandon Sanderson, where people compared Patrick Rothfuss with Brandon Sanderson and claimed that he was extremely lazy, and in fact some people attacked his personality, his integrity, calling him a liar, that he hasn't written anything in like a decade. And this is interesting to me because the irony is big. Because right now my statement is that, you know, I do not support this particular behavior, and in fact I do believe right now, as I'm standing before you, that authors do not owe readers books, that George R. R. Martin does not owe you a book, that Patrick Rothfuss does not owe you another book. And that is something I believe vehemently now. But it's not something I've always believed. It's not something I always stood by. I'm not going to excuse myself, because I was actually, when it comes especially to Patrick Rothfuss, in the extreme camp of the, you know, frothing hyenas. Basically, hyenas don't froth, but whatever, you get the point. I was extremely pissed off with Patrick Rothfuss, and it is really important to note that you can be blind to your own flaws. You can be blind to your own mistakes. Because again, I do now believe that Patrick Rothfuss does not owe us any books, but I did not before. And I want to really talk to you about this. I want to talk to you about audience entitlement. I want to talk to you about, you know, empathy. And I want to talk about, you know, different authors and how they work and how books are written. And basically argue, which something I now believe vehemently, which I did not before, which is that, you know, authors do not owe readers books, and that authors should in fact take their time with their books. Authors do not owe you books. In September, as I said moments ago, Brandon Sanderson fans and also Patrick Rothfuss fans have actually been at war, some sort of a war. And what happened is that, you know, a lot of Brandon Sanderson cross-platform fans. For instance, these are fans of both Brandon Sanderson and Name of the Wind, which is like written by Patrick Rothfuss. So they like both authors, but they are extremely frustrated with Patrick Rothfuss because he hasn't finished Doors of Stone, where in the same time, Brandon Sanderson happens to have written literally more than 10 books. People were attacking each other, defenders of Patrick Rothfuss, attackers on Patrick Rothfuss's integrity, personality, who he is, and calling him a shitty human being. And actually, that is when I realized that I was going down a particularly irksome road, that I was going down a muddy road. My particular reasoning was, okay, so George R. R. Martin, at least Winds of Winter, it's like 20 different plots, and he has to weave all of those in a manner that is good. Okay, so it takes a lot of testing, a lot of trials and error, because at the end of the day, I promise you, you do not want George R. R. Martin to make the same mistake that D&D made with season 8 of Game of Thrones, where they rushed it. I promise you, you are going to hate George R. R. Martin the same way you now hate D&D if George does not take his time. But with Patrick Rothfuss, he's doing 1/5 of the work of George R. R. Martin. So I never really hated George R. R. Martin, but he was mostly Patrick Rothfuss, right? And that meant I really was attacking Patrick Rothfuss with a lot of other people. But I seemed to have lost perspective on who Patrick Rothfuss is. He's not a god, and to write a good story, he has to take time. And different people work at different paces. And it might sound quite simple, but it is not. When you're angry, when you're frustrated, you can become blind to your flaws. Believe me, you are not special. You are not a robot who is exempt of mistakes, of, you know, learning. And that is what I want to do with this particular video. And so I realized, and I stepped back, and I tried to actually better myself and come to this particular video after a long discussion with myself. I had reached this conclusion sometime October where I no longer really hated Patrick Rothfuss, and I no longer held the belief that he owes us any books. He can literally spend the rest of the next 40 years writing Doors of Stone, and I would not be angry at him. Take your time. And the primary reason might be obvious. Different authors work at different bases. These people do not owe us any books. And the reason why primary is because they work at different bases. Patrick Rothfuss writes in much the same way, George R. Martin writes, where these two authors engage in a lot of trial and error. They engage in basically, they will write the story and then they will see changes. And these changes might be drastic. That means you have to sometimes rewrite 300,000 words, 200,000 words. That's another 2 years of your life. Someone like Brandon Sanderson, I don't know how he works. I think he's completely mysterious, but generally speaking, when it comes to his output, he seems to be doing very well with his process. But also, George R. Martin is doing very well with his process. What he has released so far, in my eyes, is very good. And if his process helps him reach good outcomes, I think he should stick with it, and I think he should write what the story needs, not rather what the fans want. And the fans would very much like it if they could grab Winds of Winter right now and start reading it. But George R. Martin, he needs to take his time and to write his story. And this is very obvious, but it is really not at the same time. Don't get it twisted. People are blind to this, and we can see hundreds of people who are out there who are insulting like someone like Patrick Rothfuss and attacking him every day based on this particular blind spot where they seem to have forgotten that, what made, A Name of the Wind good and what made it famous was that Patrick Rothfuss took his time and wrote a story that he saw as good. Thank God, because the star reviews, the general public consensus seems to be that, Winds of Winter is, Name of the Wind is good. And so that is the reality. The reality is that different people, Patrick Rothfuss, George R. Martin, Brandon Sanderson, Jim Butcher, Joe Abercrombie, all of these, fantasy authors, they work at different bases. And each one of them has a process, and the process takes some time. Okay, and you have to understand that this particular process is what has gotten them so far, and they need to keep doing it, and they need to be given the time and the trust from the readers and the fan base. And so stop yammering, stop screaming, stop bitching, stop going crazy. And that is obvious. Again, people are blind to the obvious. Go home, read other books. If you really want to read fantasy this badly, pick up The Way of Kings. Pick up the countless indie authors who are taking the genre in new, interesting ways, who are taking the genre in new perspectives that we never knew could have been, a way that we could go. So if you really love fantasy, go read the countless books out there that are waiting for your eyes, that are waiting for your attention, okay? You are not in shortage of content. You are not in shortage of fantasy books to read, especially epic fantasy books, because there's more of that than ever. So yes, have a nice day. Congratulations if you reached so far. I really appreciate you. And if you enjoyed this content, consider to chime in down in the comments, because that's the most important thing. This is a discussion. That's what I'm trying to do with this channel. And so I want you to go down into the comment section and tell me what you think of this particular topic and where you stand. So I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, consider subscribing. Have a nice day.